Hello, ninth grade. Let's get going with our fourth poem, 15, by William Stafford. South of the bridge on 17th, I found back of the willows one summer day a motorcycle with engine running as it lay on its side, ticking over slowly in the high grass. I was 15. I admired all that pulsing gleam, the shiny flanks, the demure headlights fringed where it lay. I led it gently to the road and stood with that companion, ready and friendly. I was 15. We could find the end of a road, meet the sky on out 17th. I thought about hills, and patting the handle got back a confident opinion. On the bridge we indulged a forward feeling, a tremble. I was 15. Thinking, back farther in the grass, I found the owner, just coming to, where he had flipped over the rail. He had blood on his hand, was pale. I helped him walk to his machine. He ran his hand over it, called me good man, roared away. I stood there, 15. Okay, so you can probably see why it's called 15. We definitely have that repeated quite a few times throughout here, right? So what's that called whenever you have a phrase repeated throughout? Can anybody think of that? That's the refrain, right? It's where you've got a phrase that's being repeated throughout there. And probably a lot of y'all are either at this age or close to this age, so you might be able to relate to it a little bit. 15 is kind of an odd age. You're sort of on the cusp of a lot of different responsibility. Most kids, when they turn 15, get their learner's permit, so you start learning to drive. And then once you get that driver's license, after a certain amount of time, you can go without your parents for the first time. You can get in the car and drive and go see your friends, come home from school, not have to, be waiting on your parents to pick you up or take you places or things like that. And so it's a whole lot of responsibility and it's a whole lot of freedom. And it really kind of forces you to grow up a good bit too, because, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with driving a vehicle. So 15 is a weird age because you're right on that cusp of a big leap into adulthood. And so I think that's one of the reasons why, in this particular poem, he keeps emphasizing that. So let's go through the poem and talk about what we're seeing here in the poem. He says, south of the bridge on 17th, so we assume that's the name of a road, he found behind some willows a motorcycle on one summer day, and it was still running. It was lying on its side, and it was still running and just ticking over in the high grass, just tick, 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 and so that's an unusual thing, not what you expect. He admires it in that second stanza there. He admires the pulsing gleam, the shiny flanks, and leads it gently up to the road. So, there's something about the motorcycle that just is calling to him. It's drawing him in. And I think it's because that motorcycle is a symbol for the freedom that he's so close to having. He is right there on the cusp of being old enough to actually drive off on his own. But it's interesting. Did you notice the metaphor here? What is he comparing the motorcycle to throughout there? It's not it's very subtle. You have to kind of look, but he talks about a pulsing gleam and shiny flanks and the fringed headlights. He calls it a companion. Any ideas? He's actually comparing the motorcycle to a horse. There's a lot of the same terms there that you would use to describe a horse. So he is personifying, is horsifying a thing. He's not necessarily personifying it, but he is comparing it to an animal, something that is conscious and could be a willing, participant in his search for freedom here. And because he even describes it as being ready and friendly. So it's almost like he feels like the motorcycle also wants to go on an adventure. It wants to strike out for parts unknown with him. It seems like it's almost encouraging him to do that. Okay? And so then that third stanza is just sort of the dream, what he would like to do. He's imagining what they could do. He says we could find the end of a road. Because you know how when you're looking down a road that goes a long way in the distance and you can't see where it ends, and you just kind of want to travel till you see where that ends. He says we could meet the sky on out 17th. So, eventually it gets to the part where the road just kind of disappears into the sky. And he's like, we could just ride until we met the sky. Just see where the road takes us. He says, I thought about hills, and patting the handle got back a confident opinion. So again, another way that it sounds almost more like he's talking about a horse than a motorcycle. So, he's thinking about hills and how much fun it would be to just zoom up and down hills, and the motorcycle seems confident that the two of them could handle that. He says, on the bridge, we indulged a forward feeling. So they really kind of just gave in to this idea of what it would be like to just get on that motorcycle and just go. Just take off, just have that freedom to just, lap the miles up and just go as far as you can. Just see where the road takes you. So then, I think it's important the word that he starts that next stanza with, thinking. He's been thinking in all these others, but it's been more so dreaming and thinking about himself and all of that. So I think that's important because now he starts thinking about duty and responsibility and what's the right thing to do, right? Because thinking, he says, back further in the grass, I found the owner just coming to. So obviously what he was thinking about was, wait, why is there a motorcycle just lying on the side of the road, still running? That's an odd thing, so he finally stops thinking about himself and starts thinking about what's going on here. Why would this motorcycle just be lying here? Somebody must have had an accident. I need to see if they're okay. I need to see if they need help. And so he obviously went looking for the guy, and he found him in the grass a little further out. And he was just coming to, so obviously the guy had been knocked unconscious by his fall because he had flipped over the rail. And, he's talking about standing on a bridge. So you know how the bridge... so I'm not sure if he flipped over, what part of the rail he flipped over. But you know how a lot of times bridges have those side rails that kind of come on past where the bridge itself actually is, that kind of lead into it. So he might have flipped over that part of it. He wasn't too badly injured. He did have blood on his hand, so he probably, maybe cut his hand or something. He was pale, and he had just gotten knocked unconscious, so that's to be expected. And so the speaker of the poem helps him walk to the machine, helps him walk to the motorcycle. And in a very similar manner to how the speaker had treated the motorcycle, the actual owner of the motorcycle runs his hand over it, almost like checking it, is it okay, the way, again, you would do with a horse. And then it says he called me good man and roared away. So he got on the bike and left. And then he ends by just saying, I stood there 15. So I think you really got to look at the use there of the word man. Because what's the whole poem been about? The fact that he's so ready for freedom. He's so ready for being able to just, hop in a car or jump on a motorcycle and just go and just take off and have that kind of freedom. But what do your parents always say to you? You've heard this your whole life. With freedom comes responsibility, right? And so instead of indulging his desire to just get on this motorcycle and ride, he stops and he thinks and he does the right thing, right? And so that's showing that he is actually becoming more of an adult because he's thinking about his responsibility. And so I think the fact that the guy called him a good man, even though he's only 15, really kind of may have even felt better to him than it would have to have gotten on the motorcycle and ridden off into the wild blue yonder, because he's acknowledging him not as a child or as a boy or as a teen, but he calls him a good man. You're a good man because he helped him. And he didn't run off with the bike or, do anything stupid. So it doesn't really end necessarily the way you thought it would, because you were kind of thinking he was going to go on this big ride with his motorcycle. But instead he does the right thing, and he does the responsible thing. And that's an actual bigger step towards adulthood than the freedom of that motorcycle ride would have been. Right? So the fact that he called him a good man, and that was so important to the poem, I think you would want to talk about diction, which is a poet's word choice there. And so I think that makes a big difference, the fact that he called him a man, even though he was only 15. So what's the effect of the refrain? The fact that he keeps repeating over and over, I was 15, I was 15, I was 15, I stood there 15. What do you think? It really kind of gives you this sense of just driving home the fact that he is on that very pivotal age of being 15. So I think that's a big thing, and that's why he uses that refrain there. As you can tell from the type of poem it is and the word choice and the style, it is a more modern poem. It's definitely something that was written within the past 50 years. So you've got the refrain, you've got the metaphor, you've got diction. But another thing I think you would kind of want to talk about here would be the imagery. Because I think we get some very clear images in this poem. Like, what are some parts of it you can really picture? You can really kind of see the motorcycle lying there on its side. You can see the road ending in the sky. There's a lot of images that come through here really clearly. And it's kind of interesting because it's almost like layered imagery, because he's imagining some of these things, like what it would be to ride and all of that. So it's kind of an almost layered effect of the imagery there as well. So I think that's very nicely done as well. So that's a little bit of a shorter poem, but I like this one. I think it's a good one. I think it's a feeling that a lot of you can probably identify with. I know I can still remember, even though it was, 40 years ago, not really, being 15 and being so ready to be able to drive and have that freedom and all of that. But again, you got to look at the responsibility side of it as well, too. All right, that's our poem for today.